Hello class, it is I, Mr. Mercasa, and we are back with another edition of Mr. Mercasa's Digital Lessons. This is for my 6th grade Social Studies class, and on today's lesson we are addressing textbook pages number 35 through 40. We are talking about the 5 themes of geography. So today we'll be going through these textbook pages. My recommendation for you guys is to download this PDF from the lesson on Schoology, and we'll follow along as we go through this 5 themes of geography and talk about the information presented therein. As you can see, as always, I will have the top of the textbook up here. I will use my annotation tools over here on the left-hand side to annotate the lessons we go through. And of course, I will highlight key pieces of important information as we go through this real quick. So let's go ahead and talk about the 5 themes of geography real quick. So first of all, let's go ahead and talk about this dateline real quick. So this dateline that we're talking about here, of course, is talking about plate tectonics is what this guy is talking about. Dr. Alfred Wegener is the one who suggested the idea that at one time, all the continents on the planet were together as one, and over time through continental drift, it pretty much separated itself out. Now, the reason why we're talking about this is because this study of this process is kind of like allowed things to change, right, when it ended up happening. Things like earthquakes, volcanoes, mountain ranges, monsoons, these are all the things that basically kind of created these tectonic forces that created the region of the planet that we have on. And the understanding these regions, understanding the way these places came about and developing on that is going to be really, really important. When it comes to understanding the world, what we do is we consider what's called the 5 themes of geography is what we look through. All right, and this is what we're talking about. We're talking about location, we're talking about place, we're talking about region, movement, as well as human-environment interaction. And today we're going to go through each of these different themes and talk about exactly how, when it comes to thinking about things in terms of geography, these are the things that we're looking for when we're talking about a place. All right, so let's go ahead and start this journey together real quick and talk about our 5 themes real fast. So moving on to the next page here, we're going to talk about location. Location is one of our themes of geography. Now, when we're talking about location, we're talking about 2 different things. One, we're talking about its location of a place in physical space. Where exactly on the face of the planet is this place, is this location? Another thing we're talking about is thinking about things about spatially, how did things get there? How far away is it? How close is it to you? How does it impact things, right? These are the things that we're talking about when we're talking about absolute location. So for example, the first part we're talking about absolute location, we're talking about the exact spot on the earth that it can be found at. Usually when we're talking about absolute location, we're using latitude as well as longitude to use our grid coordinate system to zero in on exactly and pinpoint where a place is located at on the planet, all right? This is what we're talking about with absolute location. Where is it absolutely physically on the planet? That's one thing we look about when we're talking about a location. Another thing we're looking about, of course, is what's known as relative location. All right, that's the second thing we're talking about. All right, we're talking about exactly where is it in relation to other places, for example. All right, that's what we're looking about here. So if we're talking about Canada in terms of relative location, where is Canada? Relatively speaking, it's north of the United States. All right, where is Mexico? Relatively speaking, it's south of the United States. That would be an example of relative location. Now, if we're asking about where is the city of Ottawa in Canada, that's when we go to our absolute location where we can use our grid coordinate system for latitude and longitude to locate it, all right? Another one could be if we're looking for Mr. Mercasa's ice cream cone that he ate yesterday, where is that located on the planet? We can use absolute location to find it, all right? That's an example of relative and absolute location in terms of that theme of geography. Another theme of geography we also talk about, of course, is place, all right? That's another thing that we look for as well. And place is kind of an interesting thing because when we talk about a place, what we're basically asking about is what is there, all right? That's what we're talking about in that case. What's the climate like? What do the language the people speak? What do they eat? What kind of physical features do they have? This is the part where we get into the questions about the region, all right? We're talking about place. We're just basically asking that same question, what's there? And not only what's there, are things changing there as well? Places change all the time, depending on the planet, right? We have weather, we have erosion, we have physical features like earthquakes and plate tectonics that take place. Places change all the time, all right? So that's another thing we also look at as well. Change being another huge influence, right? So not only is what's there, but what's changing in the region as well. Are the governments in transition? Was this country once a dictatorship and now it's a republic? Or was it used to be a republic and now it's a dictatorship? These are the things we ask ourselves all the time. We're talking about the geography theme of place. What's going on in that area as well. Another one that we look for, of course, is also region. That's what we're talking about as well. Now, what is a region? A region is commonalities. We're looking for things that are common. Let me spell that out for you guys. All right, what kind of similarities do these people have? For example, things like languages. Language is a huge thing. We just got done talking about that in our last lesson, right? We're talking about the Latin American region. Why is that a region? Because they all share the same language. Some of these places could be religions, culture, beliefs, ideologies, different things of that nature. When we're dividing up the globe into regions, this is what we're talking about. We're looking for things that are in common, that are taking place in that part of the world. And that's how we divide up our world into regions, because they have a lot of similarities between them as well. This could also be things like geographic regions as well. That's another big one, all right? Natural regions. So things like climate. Climate usually is a big indicator of what a region will have. So for example, North Africa and the Middle East, like we talked about in our previous chapter, that's a region because yes, they do share the same language, and yes, they share the same religion, but it's also regional because they also say they share the same physical geography. That part of the world is very arid and desert-like, so that's the reason why it's a natural region as well. The Rocky Mountains region, for example, that's any place that's associated with the Rocky Mountains to the United States, right? That would be an example of a region. The city of Pueblo, the city that you live in, is considered part of the Front Range. It is the eastern sloping part of the mountains, of the Rocky Mountains. That's a region because that is a natural region that's taking place there as well. Okay, so that's when we're talking about regions. Now, another thing that we talk about, of course, is also movement as well. So movement. Things that we're talking about when it comes about movement are people, goods, and ideas. We're going from one place to another. That's what we're talking about. We're not just talking about people moving around. We're talking about items moving around, goods moving around, trade, money. We're also talking about things like ideas, like religions, new ways of thinking, cultural phenomena. These are all things that we look for when it comes into movement, for example, right? A big, huge factor that's really have impacted movement over the time has been the internet. And the internet has been really huge for movement as well, especially when it comes to ideas. Right, we saw this a lot with protest movements taking place over the years throughout the Middle East, throughout Asia as well. We started seeing a lot of movement, political movement and ideologies taking place within China, within the Middle East as well. And the reason why is because these movements are taking place when it comes to ideas with the internet. Another thing we also look for too are things like migration patterns for people, right? Why do people leave one area and settle another one? All right, these are things that we're looking for. All right, so for example, immigration would be an example of a migration that we're looking at as well. Now, these are usually impacted because by things called push-pull factors, what they're called. These are the things that usually cause people to migrate from one factor or another one. We have push and we have pull factors. And these are very, very different for each other, okay? Push factors are things that are forcing people out, why people want to leave, all right? Unfortunately, a lot of countries in the world are not very stable. So because of this, they're facing a lot of problems that could push people out of the area that they're living in. Things like racial prejudice could be a huge one as well. Lack of schooling, warfare, political oppression. These are all examples of push factors. You don't want to stay in a place where you don't feel like you're safe. So that's why you want to do a lot of leaving in that case, all right? Whereas other features are pull factors. These are things that attract people to go to a different location. So for example, let's say you're facing a lot of racial persecution because of your ethnicity in the country that you're living in. That could be a push factor. So you immigrate to a different country that is more accepting of different nationalities. That would be a pull factor for you. Things like opportunities, rights, freedoms, safeties, peace, these are stability. These are all pull factors. In fact, the United States' history has been full of immigrants coming over to our country. And the reason why is because there's usually a lot of push factors for those immigrants leaving those countries, and there's a lot of pull factors in the United States that people want to come over for. That's why they come over. For example, in the 1800s, when the largest wave of immigrants came over to the United States in the 1800s, a lot of it was a lot of push factors going around the world. A lot of people were facing economic disparity, a lot of them were being racially persecuted against, a lot of them had oppressive governments, so they left their countries because of those push factors, and they came to the United States because we had things like economic opportunity, religious freedoms, social freedoms, so they came to the United States because of that as well, all right? So that's just some examples of some push-pull factors that indicate movement within a region. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about movement as well. So that's one of our themes. So with that being said, we also got to talk about some of the barriers that kind of impact movement as well, because while everything around the planet, you want to get around it, there could be some things that stop you. Things like natural barriers, for example. These are actual barriers that actually stop you from getting from one place to another, like a river or a mountain, or in some cases, an ocean. We also have man-made barriers as well. So things like laws, governments, militaries, different practices, a reason why people can't cross things. Some of them could be also just like straight up persecution. Maybe you can't go to a certain place because of your ethnicity or your religion or whatever the case may be. So these natural and artificial barriers also impede movement as well. For example, in North Korea, North Korea has artificial barriers for ideas. So like in North Korea, they do have the internet, but the internet is heavily regulated in that country, so new ideas can't come in and things can't leave either on a digital spectrum. So that could be an example of an artificial barrier, for example, as well. Now, with that being said, we're now going to go into our very last theme, which is probably the easiest theme of all, which is human-environment interaction. So what is human-environment interaction? Well, it's how humans interact with the environment and how the environment interact with humans. It says it all in the title. It's pretty much what it does. It's the easiest of all the themes to get your mind wrapped around, okay? Human-environment interaction. These are things that we're looking for example. We're looking about how human beings are adapting to, modifying, changing their environments over time. Some of these could be positive, some of these could be negative. For example, pollution is an example of human-environment interaction. It's a negative interaction between humans and the environment, but that's an example of that. Climate, weather, that's another example of a human-environment interaction. The environment's climate is affecting human beings. That's another example of human-environment interaction that we're seeing as well. Now, whether these are positive or negative interactions, that's where the main thing comes into. Now, the reason why we study these human-environment interactions is because what we're looking for is adaptations that are taking place, right? Do people have to change things? Like what kind of clothing they wear and what sports they participate in, okay? How do they make changes to survive in their environment? Do they alter their environment or do they themselves adapt to their environment instead as well? At the same time, it also shows a lot of interaction we're seeing as well during that time period as well. So what kind of natural resources are available there in the environment that people can use? All right, these are the things that we're looking for when we're talking about human-environment interaction. It's a very, very simple concept, but there's a lot of depth to it. It may seem overly simple, but there's a lot of things that are going on when it comes to human-environment interaction. So now that we're done with our textbook, now what you guys need to do, of course, is start working on your guys' questions. So I want you to work on our questions 3A, the 3C. I also want you to work on question number 4, and I want you guys to answer those in race format, where you guys restate, answer, cite, and explain. And as always, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to type it below into the discussion box below, and I'll get back to you guys as quickly as possible. So let's go right up for this digital lesson, you guys. We will catch you guys in the next one. You guys stay safe. You guys stay healthy. We'll catch you guys in the next digital lesson. Peace out, you guys.